Last week, I got to win my very first online race using my actual car. If you played any sport mode last week, then you probably know that Race C was at Autopolis in the GR86. You may have seen my Scapes video where I went around downtown Portland finding all the Scapes locations and recreating as many of them as I could in the game and in real life. I already had the color matched perfectly, but I had to make one slight alteration in order to get it to match exactly how I wanted. Strangely enough, none of the colors that are available in GT7 are any of the real-life colors. The red's supposed to be track bred, this is supposed to be Neptune blue, and this is supposed to be Tyranno blue. For some reason they've got placeholder colors, but in GT Sport, they have the real colors. Luckily for me, my incredibly talented livery maker Avalerian had already paint matched it, so I already had the Tyranno blue, but now I just wanted to add one final touch. The license plate. Obviously, this isn't my real license plate, that's just the name of my car, but I do have the Perrin license plate holder that I have in real life, and with that, I was ready to race. I had done a few laps the night before, so I was pretty confident in my actual lap, but I hadn't done a single lap of actual race pace, and if you've done any sport mode, then you know that time trial is much different because for some reason it just gives you a completely empty tank and the tires don't wear whatsoever. This race had pretty low tire wear and not a lot of fuel usage, none of the multipliers that we usually see. So it wasn't going to be too different, but it was going to be different enough that I didn't know exactly what I had in store for me. The race was essentially a copy of one of the TGR qualifying races from last year and the year before, so I knew that we just had to start in first gear, have traction control set to 1, and then we just turn off traction control as soon as we get started and shift into second gear. Things can get pretty sketchy at Autopolis turn 1, so I always suggest going for the inside as soon as you possibly can. A lot of times people will not know when to brake, or they'll just try to dive and get a position right off the bat, and that can result in being pushed off the track. If you get pushed off the track, your race is pretty much over, but if you just get hit from the back or something like that and you stay on track, you're probably going to be fine. I gave Midwest Elite a little bit of a bump, but actually I think it helped him more than hindered him, so we just kept going. I think the first sector at Autopolis is one of my very favorite sectors in all of racing. There are so many different lines that you can take and so many different moves and options. If you're in the inside or the outside, it doesn't really matter. You can definitely make a move pretty much wherever you are as long as the other person's going to be clean and as long as you know exactly what you need to do. So I was very thankful that Midwest Elite just gave me the space right there, and so we pulled off our very first pass. I think the most interesting thing about this race is the fact that there is heavy damage. As I've talked about in previous videos, heavy damage in Gran Turismo 7 means that if you take damage, the only way to repair it is to go into the pits. It doesn't self-heal like the light damage does. Since this race is only 7 laps long and obviously no pit is needed, it will completely ruin your race if you do take the pit. So I think they were really trying to teach people a lesson that if you drive too crazy, if you're reckless, or if you just decide to hit people deliberately, you're going to have to pay for it. Even more interesting perhaps is that I got damage and it only affected me by about 4 to 5 tenths, which of course is a lot, but it wasn't that devastating. It wasn't so devastating at least that I'd have to go take a pit. It was annoying, but I actually won a race from the back with damage after turn 2, so it wasn't that much of a deterrent. I do hope it ended up teaching people to be a little bit more careful, and speaking of, I have a bit of a controversial interaction with the driver coming up. As always with the really wild stuff, I would like to hear your opinion on this. It's coming up in the next few corners, but I should also say that I probably wouldn't share it and I wouldn't show it if I thought I was definitely in the wrong. But I guess that's for you to decide. So I talk about this all the time as well. Whenever I'm following 2 people or if people are battling, I usually try to just pick one of the people to try to follow. If I think one person has a better chance of making it through, I'm going to try to follow their line because that means the other person won't be able to close the door if I'm close enough. So I tried to sneak in with Cam right there, and Zero did not quite see I was there, but he immediately lifted off. He didn't try to push me in the grass, and so it wasn't that bad. I did know that I was going to be able to brake deeper, so I went for a pass. I missed the apex a little bit, but lucky for both of us, there was no contact. Stepping back just to see what he would do, he completely missed his apex, so I was really lucky not to try to pass him on the outside, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and unfortunately I paid for it. He went directly into me, he missed the apex, and he just kept going. Since the penalty system really doesn't work in this game, it allows stuff like that to happen all the time. I just like to drive people the way that they drive me. And since I tried to make a clean pass on the outside and he decided to push me and then keep going, whether or not it was intentional, I knew that I had to do something drastic in order to get past him so he wouldn't push me off, so I went for a dive. When I dive, I always stick to the line. I stick to the apex. I didn't miss it whatsoever, and he did turn into me. Whether or not he didn't see me and he turned into me, or if he did it deliberately, doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, we both traded paint. I didn't want to trade paint with him, but it happened, and we didn't really ruin our races. I got in front of him, which was inevitable in my opinion, and I definitely think that he should have been more aware to see that I was going to be trying for a pass, and I thought I made it pretty obvious, but here we are. I want to go over it with a few other camera angles though. From the initial pass attempt, it looks like I got about as close to him as I could get without actually hitting him, and I think if we did make contact, it didn't actually change the trajectory of either of our cars. From there on, he completely slid off and went past the apex, which gave me the opportunity to then just go ahead and try to make this move. And when I went for the outside, he missed the apex, went directly in my door, pushed me almost all the way off the track, and then used that bounce to keep going. Like I said before, with something as small as that, I'm not going to try to go for revenge. I'm not going to punt him off the track, but I do feel like I need to do something drastic, because if I try to make some kind of normal pass, if I try to pass him on the outside, I don't believe he's going to let me do that without pushing me. And unfortunately, I'm not going to waste my time and do that. So when I went for the pass, I definitely braked late, but I stuck to the line. In fact, I had two tires on the inside of the track, and he just kind of bounced off of me. With all of that said, I don't necessarily think he's a dirty driver. I think he was clumsy when he ran into me, and I definitely think he should have given the spot back, but maybe not. In the end of the day, when we raced again, neither of us gave each other any kind of issues. I passed him cleanly multiple times throughout the rest of the day. He gave me space each other time, and so I really think it was just a case of being clumsy, not being dirty. But I digress. In all of that talk about a potentially dirty scenario between myself and the other guy, I passed another person. I was able to pass Cam on the final corner, and because of the slipstream from Ricardon in front, I didn't have to worry about him getting back to me at all. By now it was only lap 3, and I was already in 4th position, with first place only about 3 seconds ahead, maybe even less than that. Ricardon had just made a mistake, just barely dipping his tires in the dirt, and so that made it pretty easy for me to get all the way next to him, and it made this pass a lot easier. As you can see, I learned from my braking mistake on that first pass that I tried to make on zero, and I didn't miss the apex at all that time. It's always a good idea to move to the inside here just to defend, but it can also be really sketchy, especially if you're racing people who don't really know what they're doing. A lot of people are going to go for an inside pass no matter what you do, even if you very clearly move to the inside right there. So I was really lucky that he was paying attention and he got on the brakes early enough to not hit me. It's always really nice when you give someone that you don't know the benefit of the doubt. And I know that I'd seen Ricardon before. I wasn't quite sure what kind of racer he was though. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt without having any reason to doubt that he'd do the right thing. And he did the right thing, so it felt really good. Up next, we had MCR Peanut and Andre Sav. Now, I don't actually know very much about MCR Peanut. I know that I've raced them more than a few times, but I didn't really know much about their pace or their racecraft. But I did know Andre Sav. I've been racing Andre Sav since GT Sport, and I believe Road Beef said that he's been racing him since even before then, so it's really cool to be racing against a legacy player all these years later. Whenever you see some kind of mistake like that, it's always really nice to see what kind of capabilities the person has as a driver. Peanut was able to get directly back on the line after recovering, so obviously he had at least some clue what he was doing. When it comes to approaching this final corner, I used to go really wide. I'd sacrifice the exit for this left-hander, go super wide as you can see Peanut doing, and I would try to just get a really good run. But thanks to Aphelion, I learned that you're really just wasting your time by doing that, especially in these cars. You really just want to focus on staying close, rotating your car, using the curb, and then getting back on the throttle as early as you can. Peanut did have a run because he went wider, but as you can see, especially with the slipstream, I was able to stay really close to him, and so it didn't really make much of a difference, the fact that he went for a really wide line there. This was the very first race that I had done all week, so I didn't really know how fast my fastest lap was. I felt pretty good about a 204.9, but at the end of the week, I ended up doing a 204 flat with a 203.9 optimal. Doodle, however, has a 203.5 optimal, but he also had the world record at one point, so he's just kind of built different. He's always been crazy on the road cars. Fun fact, Doodle also has over 90 world records in Mario Kart, so if someone ever jokes about Mario Kart and racing sims, you can tell them that there's some overlap indeed. It was really cool to see that so many of us had very similar pace throughout a lot of the track, but coming up in this left-hand sweeper, I know that a lot of people tend to exit in 3rd gear, and if you use 4th gear to exit here, you save yourself a shift. On top of having slipstream, that can make a huge difference, but that didn't matter too much right there because Peanut went all the way in the grass, which meant that he was going to have dirty tires, which also meant that if I made a dive, there was almost no way he'd be able to turn in early enough to hit me. So I stuck to the apex after diving, just like the one where Zero and I had an incident, and Peanut noticed, kept it clean, and I kept going. So unfortunately, this is recorded from a replay, which means that you can't actually see any of the time information. What you can probably tell is Andre is pretty far ahead. In fact, he's out of slipstream range, and it was a long time before I got close enough to him to make any kind of move. So we're going to jump ahead. It took me about a lap to get to a position where I could finally make a move. It looked like I was going to be close enough to use the slipstream and possibly pass him on the front straight, or maybe going into T1, and just as I was getting ready for an epic battle, unfortunately, Mr. Andre got himself a little bit of oversteer and overcorrected. An unfortunate anticlimactic end to what could have been a really fantastic battle with Andre. I wasn't exactly able to relax though. If you look up at the positions, Mr. Hellsfire is now the only person behind me. And while I did get the fastest lap right there, and once again on the next lap, Mr. Hellsfire beat that one by a 10th too. So, knowing that I didn't really have to worry about him beating me as long as I didn't do anything crazy, I just set out to get the fastest lap back from him. If you're familiar with this car and its roots in JDM history, being named after one of the most popular drift cars, and of course the hero car from Initial D, then you're probably familiar with the fact that this car is an absolute dream to drive by anyone who really enjoys oversteer. One of the last remaining affordable or semi-affordable rear-wheel drive sport compact cars, this car also features a traditional 6-speed manual transmission for those of you who like that, which I think most of you do if you're driving fans. This car is incredible and I really enjoy owning one. I really wish that I had more time to set a better lap. I wanted to get in the top 10, even if it took me a lot of time sweating the combination, but I unfortunately just ran out of time. So I was really glad to just go for this really small victory. I knew that I wanted to get the fastest lap in this race no matter what, and I was already up by a 10.5 almost at this point. Dancing on the edge of traction is oftentimes one of the best ways to get pace out of a car, and this car is definitely no different. Getting a little bit of oversteer in a lot of these corners, especially the corner entry, can really net really fast times. I think it's pretty rare that people come from drifting and end up using what they learned from drifting to end up being fast when it comes to racing, but I think I owe a lot of what I know about driving fast from the fact that I learned how to drift long before I learned how to drive fast. And so in situations where the car is going to get loose, or even situations where you deliberately make the car loose, I'm actually most comfortable. So again, driving this car is an absolute pleasure. So after driving all lap, pushing it a little bit beyond where I was comfortable when it comes to the limits of the car, especially since I wasn't familiar with how it was going to react each time, I was really happy to say that I did end up getting that fastest lap. So GG's to Hellsfire. I really enjoy racing against him, and anytime that I can beat his lap or beat him in a race, it actually feels really good. And I hope that if he hears this, it's not meant to be an insult whatsoever. I am really happy to be able to race against him and do well, because he's just incredibly fast. He's an incredibly good driver. And to Zero, I'm sorry for our incidents. I don't think that you pushed me on purpose, and I definitely didn't mean to make contact with you. But I think we're fine because, like I said, we ended up having good races after this. I really hope in the future PD decides to give us more cool combos like this. Obviously, I want to drive my GR86 as much as possible, but I'd really love to drive anything that isn't the same Group 3 and Group 4 races. I just hope next time they give us more than 7 laps. As always, I'd like to thank you for watching my video. If you haven't done so yet, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you like this kind of video, please let me know in the comments, because this is something that I enjoy making and I could actually make a lot of these. I just wasn't sure if people even cared. So yeah, let me know.